feel about the fact that AI is a risk to our jobs. And the reality of the matter is that any new technology is a risk to jobs. I mean, and that I think we need to embrace that. I know it's not.
Welcome back, dear listeners, to another engaging episode of the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. Today, we have a truly special episode that promises to unlock the doors, to the future of learning and innovation. We are going to be diving deep into the fascinating world of generative AI. I'm sure lots of you guys have heard about, AI, and we are happy to have, the discussion today. This is a topic that has the potential to revolutionize the way we teach and learn. And to guide us in this enlightening journey, I have the honor of hosting a distinguished guest who bridges, interesting realms. I checked your profile out and, you are in the realms of engineering, technology, and then education. Joining us is the remarkable engineer, Dr. Lucy Agyepong, who is the Vice President of Academic City. For our listeners outside of the country, this is one of the really great universities in Ghana, and I'm really excited to have her here today talk on artificial intelligence. Dr. Agyepong brings a wealth of experience having managed and delivered high-value projects in the aerospace industry, and she's here today to unravel the transformative power of generative AI. So I'd encourage all of you to grab your notepads because I'm sure there are going to be gems dropped, and get ready for an enlightening conversation that promises to shape the future of learning. Dr. Agyepong, welcome to the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone.
Awesome. Let's just, test the waters a bit. I'd like you to give us a brief introduction about yourself and your background.
Oh, but yeah, as you said, I come from an engineering background, so I did do aeronautical and aerospace engineering as an undergraduate and master's, and then I went on to do my PhD, which was in aircraft weight estimation. And actually reflecting and looking at where the world is going right now in the field of artificial intelligence. Back in my day, when I did my PhD topic actually was adaptive network-based fuzzy inference systems application to weight estimation, which is basically using soft computing tools such as fuzzy logic, such as artificial neural networks, to build up a system that was able to predict, based on limited information, the weight of what an aircraft will be like. So it's quite interesting to see 10 years down the line how, at that time, artificial intelligence was one arm of soft computing tools that exist. And it's quite interesting to see what it's doing now. So I did my PhD and I moved into industry. I was very privileged to work with organizations that I've always wanted to work for, do projects across a variety of sectors. And I got to work with and do a lot of work with them as well as diverse other companies, including rail, transport, so all sorts. I was working for a company called Technology Center, which was all about how do we bring innovative solutions to the field of industry so that we could actually make use of it. So if you look at academia or if you look at universities, particularly those doing advanced research, their research is at a blue sky level. So it's unique, it's different, but it's not usable by industry. And we were looking at, how do we turn this groundbreaking article that you may have written or publication that you've done into something useful that industry can pick it up and run with. And then after that, I decided to come back home and, come into academia and see how I could be of help. And here I am.
Interesting. Your journey has been wow, from the engineering space, getting into, the aero area as well. What was the motivation to get into education?
Right. So I remember that I knew that going to the aero engineering, I always, when I was young, I remember really, really wanting to become a pilot because I was fascinated by planes.
Interesting.
And I do actually have terrible eyesight. And 2020 vision, before you can fly or become a commercial pilot. So I was like, okay, because I was interested in aircraft, then I'm looking at how to build it. And that always guided my passion for aeronautics. But I guess it wasn't until I got to the MCC in the UK, when I got there, I just felt that, okay, now I know why I'm here. I'm here to try and learn as much as possible in industry and be able to go home and effect change. And the reason why I decided to do that is that when I was in the UK, when I was working at MTC, I was working at bringing emerging technologies from academia. So we worked with in universities such as Nottingham, Birmingham, Loughborough, and then we would come up with innovative research and then send them over to industry. And I started reflecting, and I was like, if we look at the universities in Ghana, we have a lot of universities that are doing research, but it doesn't look like as a nation we are transforming as much as we could be. It doesn't look like, if I throw my mind back to my high school, which I did in Ghana, even though is one of the best schools there, if you look at how we teach these courses, they tend to be more a deterrent to some girls or to some other people as opposed to be something that you're excited about, something that you don't feel afraid of. So when I had this opportunity and I felt like we have to come to Ghana to do something, back in January 2019, there was a CON50 diaspora and engineers to look at how do we bridge the technology gap in Ghana. Because obviously Africans are excelling everywhere else. So why are we not making that much of an impact in Ghana? So they decided to bring everybody in. And that was where I met Professor Fred Masogalu, who's the president of Academic City. And he was like, Lucy, why don't you come up and let's team up and do this? We can look at how do we make sure that, yes, as opposed to doing just any random research, some research that actually impacts and solves the problem. And can we take it a step back further and go to the undergraduate level and shape those future-ready leaders who can actually make an impact with our industrial experience as opposed to be just traditional academic experience?
That's interesting. I mean, I was listening to you and I 100% agree with you that there's clearly a disconnect between academics and industry. And we're seeing how a lot of developed nations have that smooth or seamless transition from the academic space into industry. Interesting. I guess this background is the perfect segue into the next question, which is your general take on the education landscape in Ghana.
Right. That's an interesting one, the education landscape in Ghana, because I think that actually is not limited to even Ghana alone. If you look at a lot of institutions across the world, it looks like academia is the only field, or at least at the undergraduate level, whereby most of what is being taught is based on information that has existed for 50 or 70 years and it seems to be static. And for a field that is meant to prepare for the next generation of innovators or learners or people who are going to impact the world, and I feel like at the undergraduate level, education does not mimic what industry does. And I'll give you a classic example. So you see that prior to COVID, even Ghana Tertiary Education Council didn't recognize online degrees. And if you actually go into industry, you will realize that it is the only industrial sector that is able to adapt in the face of adversity that actually ends up surviving and thriving. When COVID hit, all those that were not able to move their businesses to e-commerce, all those that were not able to change the way we do things actually went through that. But somehow we only academia that people have tried to stick to their guns and still do the same thing over and over again. We truly believe, or at least I truly believe, and it's in line with what Academic City does, is that transformative education is highly reliant on educational curriculum that's able to adapt and see what is coming up next. What is the next big boom looking like? And how do we make sure that our students, our graduates, are part of the people that are shaping this? Africa as a continent, we've always been consumers of technology. So someone creates the technology and then we use it. Someone creates it, and when they've used it to, and from the time with this, and it comes down to us, and then we use it to, and it's one element. And that is what is one of the most beautiful things about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has actually been in existence from like in the early 80s, right? It's just that by virtue of system capabilities, by virtue of new technologies, by virtue of new research, we are now starting to see its true potential in our time. And even now, even though the AI train is fast moving, this is one of those unique opportunities that we can jump onto the same bandwagon and start to be creators of those technologies as well, because it's still in development stage to some extent. So we need to change our educational system that is one that is not just waiting for the technology to be fully developed somewhere else or to be handed over. This is the time now that we should be talking about the topics we're talking about. This is the time now we should be infusing some new and emerging technologies within our educational systems, educational curriculum, so that we are not behind, so that we are creating things that is for us, by us, content-specific things that will help us transform our nation. So I think the educational landscape across Ghana, across some educational institutions, is still a little bit archaic, and we need to bring them to the modern century that is today. We need to say, okay, what are the latest tools, and how do we deploy these innovative curriculum, and how do we teach it so that people are not just reciting for us what they know, but they are able to demonstrate, showcase, build, use it to make something very useful.
Really interesting insights. So I was just thinking whilst you were talking about the fact that there seems to be a drag, and you used an interesting word, which is archaic. So I'm thinking back to, at least I've read a bit of history, so 50s, 60s, and we had a lot of that generation doing, once you got into education, they had the opportunities to travel out and experience education, outside in these developed countries. And most of them did come back, and it's run. You can see that thread run through where, in a situation where a lot of us travel, we still want to come back to see what we can improve. In my line of work as a co-host, I do interact with a lot of entrepreneurs in the edtech, specifically in the edtech space. I spoke to one recently, and he described the education space and academia as a dinosaur. And it just seems to be running through where you speak to people, and that's just the same thread that runs through. So I'm wondering how a generation that to an extent were exposed to quality education, right, came back, and we have managed some way, somehow, to have education and academia stagnant to where we are not looking forward to what's going to happen, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, and even 50 years. Very briefly, what would you say is the account for that? Is it the culture? Is it the mindset? Is it both? What's your take on that?
I think you've nailed it on the head. It's not an easy conundrum. It's not an easy thing to try to decipher. It is an element of everything. I remember when I officially moved back home, I came in July 2019. And the things that used to frustrate me, people not being on time, people disrupting, regulations, and people not sticking to what the right thing to do, trotro drivers driving anyhow. And you give yourself 2 years and you don't even notice it. You start to realize the things that used to frustrate you don't frustrate you as much. I remember that we had a meeting with a colleague, and she came and nobody was there. We were there, and we were like, "Oh, don't worry, you get used to it." And actually, I was proud of myself because I'm like, "No, we shouldn't get used to it."
Right.
And sometimes that's what happens because we kind of settle. But I feel like with everything, you need some form of strong leadership and direction, whereby people enforce things. that's why there's a big role for either Ghana Education Service or even from the tertiary level, Ghana Tertiary Education Council to wake up, because it's up to those regulators to put things into place to say that this is how we should do it. I mean, the likes of ourselves, Academic City, other institutions have been trying to do it differently, and because we have the flexibility and the mandate to do so. But if you go back into public universities, the bureaucracy to even introduce a new program is ridiculous. It takes them forever to introduce any new program because of the tweaks, as you would say, steps and processes that they have to go through. You need a VC or somebody to come and say, you know what, I don't want to use bad expletive words here, but forget about it and let's just challenge ourselves and do things differently. And sometimes it's very hard to do that. And I feel that's why we tend to be stuck in this cycle of a loop. But you need people who are rebels to break out and say, no, we are not doing it the way that you are all comfortable with, to really move us forward. We need to be different, and we have to, fight heads, butt heads or whatever, but move ahead so that we can make that change.
I mean, just to piggyback, one of the things I am excited about is, the private tertiary space expanding, right? Yeah. As having a lot of private universities popping up, both in the formal and then, in the non-formal areas. I feel like that's our opportunity to be able to bring about that change that we seek to see.
Yeah, there's no developed country that you would go to that their top 3 universities are public.
Yeah.
There's none.
Yeah.
There's none. Yeah. But you come to Ghana and that's what it is. That says something.
That's a really good point. Interesting. Oof. Enough about Ghana and things that are dragging us back.
That's
this exciting this exciting space we are in. Okay, with your engineering background, I want to touch on the intersection between engineering and education. You alluded to the fact that it's generative AI has been around probably 80s, early 90s, thereabout.
Yeah.
Given your extensive background in engineering and technology management, how do you see the integration of generative AI, impacting the field of education, particularly in the STEM disciplines?
Right. So, when you come to generative AI, so, artificial intelligence in itself as the broad topic area is massive, and it has so many different branches, so many different ways you can look at it. I mean, one of the courses I teach at Academic City is in technology and society, and we touch on new and emerging technologies or disruptive technologies that have come to solve problems that you didn't even know existed, and technologies that are, changing the way we do stuff. And artificial intelligence is one of those technologies, and it started off about, okay, how do we make a device smart? How do we make it do the mundane task? Then it starts going to the next level that says, okay, whereas with historical devices whereby you can train it. So what I was doing with my PhD was training a data set so that based on the information it's been given, it can make similar assumptions. So let's say if I train a data set that if, let me use an arbitrary example, like there's a stapler. If you have something that is, let's say 10 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide, and this height and it tapers, is likely to be a stapler. And you train multiple data on that. Then if you put some data into it, let's say if you put the length, the height, the system will be able to tell you that, based on what I've learned so far, I estimate that it will be around this figure. And, that is where there's a bit of the intelligence started coming, and vast amounts of data being trained and to identify patterns, to identify sequences, to the extent that, it can make informed decisions. Now, where we are going now with generative AI, and this is where it's a little bit different from traditional AI, is that now this AI, based on what it's learned, can generate content and adapt it to suit. I remember one of the questions that I asked in my technology and society class was, what was AI not capable of doing? So for the past 3 years ago, when we were teaching AI, we'd say, what is it not capable of doing? And one of the answer at that time was spontaneous creativity, that it couldn't create something from scratch without it not being based on something. But however, with generative AI, we have now started to go towards that area whereby artificial intelligence itself can generate its own images, can generate its own music based on influence of what is studied over the years. So it's not particularly programmed, which is a traditional AI where you program something to do smart and do something. But this one is, being able to create something based on a few prompters and based on a few patterns and data that has been trained on for it to actually create something completely different. And so relating that to the STEM fields and to see what is possible, I think the possibilities are endless of what you can actually do with such content creation. I know that a lot of the times examples that I use when it comes to generative AI lies within the humanities, because if I think music, if I think poetry, because those are the fun things to do, but there's actually so much more that you can use it to do. You can use it to run automation and work. You can get it to do some so hands-on and bring some level of advancement to your production line than you ordinarily wouldn't. When we come to the education sector, the beauty of generative AI lies in its ability to personalize education for you. All right. So, at the moment, in our traditional universities, we put everybody in one bucket. And then we give you, let's even use assessments as an example, we give you all one assessment. And it doesn't look at your individual abilities or your individual strengths to be able to evaluate your learning speed. We expect that everybody this course together by the end of the semester, you should have all got it. And those who have not got it or have not been able to keep up with the pace, but with generative AI, you can adapt based on the data or based on responses. When you do assessments and you get the responses, you can use that to even predict and tell you the caliber of students you have, so that you can even want to consider to adapt your teaching style. You can have different forms of assessment. You have people that, I was invited to some international school graduation, and we were talking about the fact that some people are learn tutorial when it comes to learning. You have to show them. So with generative AI, you can generate with the same information for those that are bit more pictorial, you can hence relating to that. For people that are a bit more, they have to hear it over and over, you can generate audio content for that. So those are some of the opportunities that really exist when it comes to generative AI in the education sector. And you've merged that with STEM and merged that with saying that I now want to come up with something that can solve a problem. And the opportunities are endless.
I absolutely agree with you. So I was listening. First thing that stood out to me was I absolutely like the title of your course, which is Technology and Society. It's just perfect. I'd want to be in your class one day.
It's a very interesting class.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. And if it's possible to even have it in the pre-tertiary space as well, I think it will do remarkable things for our country moving forward. And then I was listening to you, and there's a part that I absolutely agree with you on, the fact that with technology and the internet, we're able to democratize and personalize learning. And that's really wild, when you think about how education has been structured and delivered for God knows how long. So as a perfect segue into our next question, with the fact that generative AI has the potential to personalize learning experiences for students, right? How can an educational institution strike that balance, right? Because there are big concerns with privacy and data and all of that. How can educational institutions strike that balance between tailoring education to individual needs whilst protecting students' data and privacy?
Yeah, that is a very, very, very important thing, because again, if you look at the part of the world that we live in, You don't want anybody to come. We still stigmatize things that are not what we know, unfortunately. Which means that if you therefore say that, oh, because you're not getting things the way we're getting it, I'm going to use your personalized data to create a learning material for you that is going to be at a much, much lower pace. And people start laughing at you, say, wabble, and that be visa. So what we need, and I think there's something that in Ghana in general we do need, is basically how do we make sure that the data that we are collecting to provide this personalized approach is collected in a secure manner. And not available for anybody to tap into. So that's when it comes to data privacy. I think that is a very important thing. So institutions, what are we doing? What policies do we have in place to say that, okay, this data that I'm collecting to do my training or my analysis, after that, what happens to the data? How is it stored? How do we make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands? So work around data within our institutions to make sure of that. Also, the now drivers of this will always be, you need to make sure that if you're collecting personalized data, similar with GDPR, you are getting consent. So if obviously somebody does not want to provide consent, then that's that as well. Talking about the fact that when it comes to how do you handle data, or how do we ensure that balancing personalization and making personalization of the learning experience, how do you protect that student data? How are we managing our data? And what is the once you've done, let's say, used a success training set to provide a particular response of what you want to do, and say, oh, I'm going to tailor your educational system to you. What do you do with the information after that? Is that available for everybody to see? Because that's when you start to go into the breaches of people's personal data. So as institutions, I mean, even as a country, we need to look at how are we ensuring that we are protecting people's data that are actually there with us. Alternatively, the easiest one to do then is to anonymize it. All right, which means that you sample or get a number of people to take the whatever data that is needed out of there. So to give you a personalized, let's say if you're doing an online course, and I think it's the easiest way to do it. At the start of your course, you could take a randomized assessment, which will determine your capability, and then release the set of learning materials that you need at your level to you. There's that. So you can anonymize that without saying that, without saying Akushia is a YY. But you can do it in such a way that that data itself is anonymized. But then the work then has to be done at the back end. So whatever they inputted to get access to their level of education or their personalized education, how do I handle that? And that's where, again, putting privacy policies into place comes into being. And again, I think it's very important. We must be taking people's information without your consent and making everything, make sure that it's transparent. So where we have to get information, let me know that, oh, this information you're submitting is for this purpose. And after 6 years, which is in line with GDPR, that data has to be truly expunged. You have to put those mitigations in place that people are not selling people's personalized data. There's a lot of work to be done around that. But while that is being done, I still feel like we shouldn't lose sight of what can be truly beneficial when you kind of like implement some of these things the right way. You understand? We start to then stop shaming things like dyslexia, stop shaming people who don't learn the traditional way, but rather you can use technology to learning or even adapt the curriculum to suit how somebody will best understand it. We in Ghana need to just get away from the idea that when someone goes to a school, they are there to go and chew baba. We want to make sure that when people are leaving school, they understand and can apply. And how you test people to do that can vary.
I like that. When people leave school, they should be able to understand and apply. That's absolutely spot on. Could you share examples of how generative AI is currently being used to create educational content or adapt to existing curriculum materials to better meet the needs of learners?
Okay. Yeah. So I think a classic example is what I was talking to you about. Um, being able to do a form of simple assessment to just to understand the caliber of how they answer questions. How you can use generative AI within the education example. You're asking me to give specific examples.
Yes.
I think it comes down to even teaching styles, right? And I think I'm really big on this whole dyslexia element because I remember when I was in primary school, if you didn't get things quickly, if you're not lucky, you get lashed, right? And then the whole class will know that you're not progressing because so you can use generative AI to kind of like, depending on the student's need, you can use it to adapt the difficulty level of the examination questions, right? And this is where I talk about the focusing on applied knowledge as opposed to being able to memorize everything. One of the things that I've been strong advocate for is outcome-based teaching or outcome-based engineering, whereby as opposed to me asking you a question and say, oh, tell me Ohm's law or tell me Bernoulli's principle, rather saying that use it to solve a problem. Ask a question but how do I apply it? What does it mean if I were to apply this to a sector? And what can I create with it? And how you act that can vary. And that's where the personalization comes in, whereby depending on the kind of student they are, if they are more hands-on and they need to build, their examination or assessment will be in the form of a project that they actually have to create. If there's somebody who is better at explaining, understand, their exam could be that, no, demonstrate and explain, as opposed to expecting that everybody should be able to write an essay on a paper. I think that's a classic example.
I mean, really, it's somebody would say this should be, straightforward and common sense, but it's interesting how things have gone on a certain particular way for a very long time, and we are really yearning for results. So there was this conversation I was having about, what the outcome of education is, and I think we just came to the conclusion that education really, you should be able to have some skill sets, right, to be able to positively impact your society. And if education is not able to do that, then no matter how expensive your school fees is, then you don't really have any sort of education. And it seems like the advent of the internet, the speed at which technology is it's innovating and changing the landscape is forcing us to look at the hard things, the hard foundational structures that we are supposed to build to sort of get our human resource to a certain standard to be able to change, the very basic things you complain about, like, being time conscious, making sure that we're not throwing rubbish around, making sure that we are thinking about how to, make mundane things very, seamless and easy. So we are able to, get our brains to think more creatively about, other things. And yeah, this conversation really does excite me. Definitely with all the buzz and the excitement about generative AI and whatnot, there are definitely challenges that are popping up, right? One I remember there was a session I sat in, and the question was thrown that, do you know about generative AI? Everybody's hand shot up. Do you like it? Everybody said no. Why? Then, things popped up like, it's going to take our jobs and so on and so forth. What are your initial thoughts on that?
So I remember I recently did a presentation for a company, and we're talking about empowering Ghana and Africa. How are we going to harness artificial intelligence for economic transformation? And that was one of the questions that came up, that how do you feel about the fact that AI is a risk to our jobs? And the reality of the matter is that any new technology is a risk to jobs. And that, I think we need to embrace that. I know it's not what normally people will say, but in reality, if you think about it, throw your mind back to many, many years ago,
And if you look at the people that used to, make fire with stones and everything, when other means came, they lost their jobs. People just had to adapt. And that's the beauty of our human beings. We have this innate skill in ourselves to be able to adapt and depending on where we find ourselves. Now, if you look at even the Industrial Revolution, immediately when we start going, if you look in the West where they started going full automation for assembly plants, yes, people did lose their jobs. A lot of lower skilled workers did lose their job because these were being replaced by robots and and whatnot. However, new jobs came as well. New jobs in people who were actually designing the robots, people that were actually programming them, people that were actually, there was an increase in higher skilled jobs. So when people say that, we're afraid about artificial intelligence because it may take our jobs, at the moment, we have not got to that level where AI is going to take over human beings. Okay.
So you were touching on the fact that people we are much more adaptable than we think.
Exactly, we are much more adaptable than we think, and with every disruptive technology that has come, we are still here as humans. One of the things that I always even teach within my class of technology and society, I do let people know that with every new technology that comes, there are winners and there are losers. Every technology. If you look at how when e-commerce came into being, and if you look at the prevalence of everybody migrating their shops online, even in the UK, a lot of shops had to shut down because people were not going into their shops again. People did lose their jobs, but there were new jobs created. If you look at the banking sector, right now, back in the day, you used to go to the bank and there'll be about 10 or 20 tellers all there. Right now, you go and there's 2. Because there's a computer and you can just go and log on unless you need to see somebody specifically for a particular challenge. Again, some jobs went, but new jobs were created. If you look at the jobs that exist now, social media influencers, cybersecurity specialists, data analysts, experts, those things didn't exist before. But now they are here because the nature of job is changing. What we need to do as a people is to say, how do we make sure that we become of those who are the winners of this technology, not the losers? How do we adapt and give ourselves skills so that we are the forefront of the ones driving the technology, as opposed to being doing the mundane task? Today, for me, I think it doesn't make any sense if there's a device that can run 24 hours, doesn't need lunch breaks, to do repetitive work that doesn't require brain power.
Right.
Job will go. And if someone is there telling you the job is going, I don't see why you should cry about it. What you should therefore say is that, what skills can you give me so that I can now go and man these machines, so that I can be the one behind it, giving it instructions. I'm not saying people shouldn't be upset. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not disheartening and it's not distressing. It is, but as opposed to just looking at it from the negative side, let's just say, what skills can we get to ensure that we are future ready and we are part of the people driving new innovative technologies?
I was listening to you and the thought just came to mind. I was thinking, is it that the disruption that AI technology, the internet, etc., has exposed Ghana and if you stretch it, Africa, to the fact that our education was just training us to come and deal with mundane tasks, and so it's like technology is just saying please, this is not necessary anymore. What's happening here.
Exactly. And we all, things like that make us a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
When the reality hits in, and and the nature of it is that education systems or educational institutions are supposed to impart knowledge for you to go there and make a change. I remember one of the things when I work in industry, because of the nature of the work we used to do, there were some projects that would come to my institution that would turn it away, because we said, this is a problem that any engineering firm can solve. So go to somebody who does this as their bread and butter. If you're going to bring a challenge to us, it has to be something that nobody can fix or nobody can solve. Then we put a lot of research and resources into it. people have just become comfortable just doing the mundane tasks. And the reality of the matter is that it's not sustainable. So when people ask me that, is it true that AI job is going to take our jobs? See, I'm not the ones that will say, oh, it will take mundane tasks away. They're just saying that I'll find that unique thing. Be the critical thinker. Be someone who's being innovative. The jobs that AI can't do, you be that. Get the necessary skill set to be able to do that. Move on to the programming side. Learn how to code. Become find where you can actually still survive, so that when your job does go, it doesn't leave you wanting. You still have some other skills. And this is where I come back to look at what's happened in the last thousands of years. Technologies have come, and I don't think this is going to be the last technology that will come. And we are still here. Yes, if now AI is getting to that level whereby it's getting to people are wary of the machine consciousness, AI being able to self-start and then see that, humans are not even longer leaders, so I'm going to eradicate all humans, and AI is going to take over the world and all that. And that's where I like to reassure people that we are not there yet, and that is why there's been a lot of constant advocacy from people to say that the capabilities of AI is truly tremendous. So let's do controlled research. AI has become one of those fields that anybody is getting up and coding things, right? And actually, we are starting to see that the benefits of that can start to spiral to do things that we are unexpected. I said with every technology, there's unintended consequences. So we just need to have a strategic rollout of these technologies so that we can manage the unintended consequences if they do arise.
I hear you, but don't you think that we on the continent bear, a much bigger brunt of all of this? Because when you think about it, right? So I'm listening to you speak about most of the transformations that have happened, even with the advent of the internet and how people lost their jobs and whatnot. Africa has generally been very slow to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of there's so many things that are popping up. So when we cry, it's a cry from deep within, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's how do we rally everyone to get on board, just so that we run, for much of a better description, run faster to catch up. Because if somebody in the West is crying about job loss as a result of AI,
what about us in Africa?
Exactly.
And that is why, again, sometimes I always talk about contextualization of, how at the start of my submission I talked about we need to create an AI for us that is unique for us. What are the pertinent challenges at the moment that we can use AI to solve? We shouldn't, that's what I'll say, we shouldn't pick up and program artificial intelligence of how it's been set up in the West for what it needs to be doing for Africa. Yes, eventually we'll get there, but there are things that we can use it for even now. That is unique and tailored to us. The thing is that you are right, when it comes to some of the work that we do, we're so far behind that most people's jobs are repetitive. Most people's jobs are mundane. That's why it comes to advocacy channels such as yourself, what you're doing here on your podcast, other media engagement. We're doing outreach sessions, people talking about it and people hearing about it, because it requires the masses to come together for us to be able to have transformational change. And my worry is that if we don't come together as a collective to do it, and again, as usual, Africa will always be behind.
Right. Interesting. What other, aside the jobs bit, right? There's also the issue of AI having certain biases, towards certain things, right? How do we manage that challenge?
So you see that's the beauty of artificial intelligence, or it's not actually just unique to AI. If you look at any kind of like data set system that you throw information at it, and you generate information out. That the information that you get out is as good as the data you've put in. So if you look at where artificial intelligence is originating from, a lot of the training data has been data that has come from the West, which means is biased towards the West. So then if you pick that technology and come and implement it in Africa, it won't work because it's not based on the people here. That is why I'm saying this is a unique time for us to also be part of the program and so that we create something that is unique for us. I remember listening to an article, reading an article and listening to this lady who did a research, and basically as part of her research, she came up with an AI model that is able to, profile or identify faces. Based on the data set that was available to her, she realized that it was able to an accuracy of around over 90%, able to identify white people. When you put a black face, you couldn't recognize it.
Wow.
And that was because the training data set, the data it's been trained on, we started with the definition of artificial intelligence and generative AI, that generative AI is basically its ability to train itself on data and then create content based on that. So if all the content I have is from the West, then output is from the West. Even use ChatGPT as an example. I use ChatGPT. I deliberately went to ask ChatGPT as part of my course, What's Technology, What's Society, and how does it impact Africa? And I asked it to give me a specific examples for Africa on X, Y, and Z. And it said it couldn't do it because it didn't have that data. And that is a classic example of why we need to be part of the creators of the technology, not just users. Otherwise, the biases won't go away because AI self-learns, continuously learns. So if you introduce new data sets, if you introduce more data that is representative from a sector or group of people, then it becomes able to adapt. So one of the challenges they've had in the US, or people are complaining in the US, is that we know that when it comes to people that are incarcerated, there's a bias against the number of black or harsher punishment against black people, right? But then if you then pick 100 years of, let's say, sentences that have been administered to who and how long, and you train a system on that data, then if you ask the system to automatically sentence, it's only going to go based on experience, not what is right or wrong. Which means if you've then trained the data to say that, okay, and the data will realize automatically that, if it's a black person and it's an armed robbery or blah blah, sometimes it's this way, without taking the emotional aspect into consideration, which is something that maybe a jury would hear and say, actually this guy is a unique case. Actually, it wouldn't take that into consideration. So it's heavily reliant on the data that's used to train the system. So the biases come from the data that's been used to train the system, and we need to therefore balance it out by creating and collecting more data that we can use to offset that balance. The challenge in Africa is that we don't store any data.
Interesting.
You have to start from somewhere.
There's a lot to unpack. As AI-driven technologies become more, prevalent in education, how can we ensure that all students, regardless of their socioeconomic backgrounds, have access to the benefits of generative AI and resources?
So this is where it comes down to policy and access to. This is where we have to heavily rely on government or other private organization, because we need strong infrastructure to be able to do this. If we really want to have that transformational change, we need a national agenda, a national AI and for education agenda to say that as a nation, let us dedicate some money, some resources, so that we make sure that irrespective of where you're coming from, where you sit, you are not disadvantaged because you do not have access to that. And that requires a lot of money and a lot of funding. So I would say for us to be able to make this accessible, we need the right infrastructure to support and the right policies to ensure that they happen. Because if we're looking at that, if at the moment I know that GES is coming up with a new curriculum and they are rolling that out, but if your form of assessment right now is still going to be based on it's going to be based on the way questions are set today. I mean, we heard about it last year where people were just spending their time in buying past questions. So that's something that AI can do easily for you. You don't even need generative AI. They can just memorize all the questions and based on patterns tell you what kind of questions is going to come. But it shouldn't be about that. It should be rather about how do we ensure that people are able to actually show an understanding of what they've learned and they can actually make something useful with that. And for that, we need a dedicated approach. And we need a national agenda or a national policy and a national drive to ensure that we reach out and we do it properly.
Awesome. You're sharing some really, really interesting gems. So how should universities and teacher training programs adapt, to prepare educators to effectively leverage on generative AI tools and technologies in the classroom and ensure that they enhance rather than replace traditional teaching methods?
Yes. With everything, you need a good balance. And I think that we need to embrace the technology is here to stay, and we need to know that as educators or as facilitators of knowledge, that the group of people that we are teaching know more about the technology than we do, and that's the reality of the matter. I have a 1-year-old, and when she picks a phone and the way she flips between apps, it will amaze you. And she's 1.
Yeah.
So the generation that we're teaching they have more access to some of these technologies and they understand it more. So you, the lecturer, you, the facilitator, cannot still remain archaic. We actually need to abreast ourselves and say, what is the new and emerging technology? One of the things that I just found out when I went to a high school to do as part of their 20th anniversary is for them to tell us that, if you're on Facebook, then you're old. The young people are not even on Facebook anymore. And say, hey, technology is changing at a rapid rate. So we as educators need to find a way, how do we embrace this technology? I am one of those people that I don't feel like we can migrate every course online. No, I do feel that there are elements of some courses that requires the human interactivity, and we should highly encourage that. So we shouldn't allow a system to automatically take that, even though it can. But rather, let's look at that and say, how do we use artificial intelligence as a tool? The same way I will teach students to use MATLAB so that they can use it to solve problems. The same way we can use Python programming so that they can build things. We as facilitators need to say, how do we teach you artificial intelligence as an enabler, as a tool that you can use to actually do things that normally would have taken you 10 years to do. Now you can do it in a year, or you can do it in 5 days.
Interesting. Really interesting. I hope my listeners are taking notes, because I am putting down a lot of things. You're sharing some really, really, really interesting stuff. I wanted to talk about the adoption, right? The adoption and use of AI. Somebody listening to us might think, AI is very, very, very accessible. Just the ordinary Joe on the streets might be using AI. Are there issues with, its adoption and use?
Say that again.
So so in terms of AI penetration, let's put it, in terms of AI penetration, somebody listening to us might think that we have about 90 to maybe 99% of the people of the population using AI, right? Yes. In that regard, in terms of its adoption, AI adoption and use.
Yeah. So the way I would like to address this question, whether there are challenges in this adoption and use, is that I think this is where it comes back down to controlled creation, the creation of what is possible. So right now a lot of people are they're coding and seeing, oh, what can be done, what is possible. Mm-hmm. That is the element that I feel like we need to control a little bit more, so that at least it's transformation. Not, I don't want it to be slowed, but at least it needs to be done so that we make sure that any regulations that we can put into place around things that you've even raised within this discussion, people's security, data protection, cybersecurity, and the likes, so that we can get those things in place, so that we make sure that people don't use don't create artificial intelligence in such a way that it becomes a disservice to us all. So there are those things that I'll say that need to be controlled. But in terms of the adoption, I would say no, the more the better. Is in the creation of what else it can do that I feel like we need to have a controlled approach.
Dr. Agyepong, thank you so much. You've shared. I've learned a lot. I've generally learned a lot today about AI, AI tools and so on and so forth, and how blending them with the sort of education structure that we have now can bring about a lot of positive to the space that we are in. So my last question would be, if anybody came to you and said, Dr. Agyepong, there's AI all around, it looks like it's going to take away all our jobs. You said it won't, but from where I start, it looks like it's going to take all of our jobs. What job opportunities are there that I can, take advantage of if I do leverage on the AI and the AI tools available?
Yes. So I think at the moment, AI is still being used as a tool and as an enabler for the work that we do. So for instance, if you are someone who's an educator such as myself, luckily we are not at that level yet where you go into a classroom and it's just a computer sitting there or a robot talking to you. But rather you then now need to say, okay, now that I have access to artificial intelligence, how do I even make my class more engaging? How do I use it as a tool to make sure that the diverse nature of students in my class are understanding the principles of it? At the moment, I can tell you that at Academic City, a lot of the students are even using artificial intelligence to generate some of their presentations. But then that is up to us, the lecturers or facilitators, then to then say, can we have a look? Can we ask the relevant questions so that we make sure that the students have grasped and understood what they are actually presented? I feel like with any jobs, the jobs that currently exist, if I feel like you need to get on the programming bandwagon, everybody needs to embrace, that's why I say we should all become advocates for STEM or STEAM. A bit of science, a bit of technology, a bit of engineering, maths, and even the arts. The arts are the drivers of innovation, If you look at the story of how robots came into being, a lot of these things come from fiction, where an artist or someone created it, and then we, the engineers, will say, okay, then how do we actually make it into reality? So there's a bit of a part for all these people to play. I would just say that, look at saying that, which part of my tasks do I do right now that are mundane? That don't require any creativity, that don't require anything of the bits that makes that the human becomes a distinguishing factor. If all elements of your job does that, then my dear, start looking for what other skills can I get so that I go on the other side, because that's the reality. If your job is that you are a personal assistant and all you do is schedule calendar, arrange for meetings, and take phone calls, Siri can already do that.
Right.
I don't need your job now becomes vulnerable. So the question is, what else can you do? What skills can you acquire? Maybe go some night school, do some online courses, get additional skills that puts you on the technology side so that you can become the user of the technology. So if your job is mundane and repetitive, you're at high risk. That one day I won't lie to you. Do a reflection or review and say, okay, what isn't high? What else can I bring to the table that is innately human that I can then look to support or lead to make myself a bit more secure and to get me away from just being here and doing mundane tasks.
Thank you so much. It's when you're having fun, that's when time really flies. Thank you so much for coming on today. Your optimism and passion is evident, and to an extent really infectious, and it's a blessing to have you and to be part of the education space. Thank you so much for who you are and what you do. Please keep this fire burning inside and continue to make transformational change and impact one student at a time. Thank you for hopping on this podcast with us. I will definitely invite you again to talk about some other matters regarding education. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today.
Thank you so much, Kwame, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Have a good day.
Awesome. And thank you all for joining us on this enlightening journey into the world of generative AI in education. Our sincerest gratitude goes out to our exceptional guests, Engineer Dr. Lucy Agyepong, for sharing her profound insights and expertise. As we end this episode, we are clearly reminded of the incredible potential that generative AI holds for transforming our education space and making it more personalized, more accessible, more impactful. The future of learning really is undoubtedly exciting. I mean, Dr. Agyepong and all the other guests I've interviewed previously are just showing how exciting the space is looking, and I'm just looking forward to 10 years how things are going to look. So to our listeners, stay tuned for the next episode. We will continue to explore cutting-edge trends, innovations, and thought-provoking discussions that shape the landscape of education in Ghana and beyond. Thank you so much, and until next episode, please stay safe.